HMS Triumph was a Royal Navy Colossus-class light fleet aircraft carrier. She served in the Korean War and later, after reconstruction, as a support ship. Construction and commission. Triumph was laid down during World War II on 27 January 1943 at Hawthorne Leslie and Company on the Tyne. Her construction was relatively rapid and she was launched on 2 October 1944, only a few months from the end of the war. She was commissioned into the Royal Navy on 6 May 1946. Korean War service. In 1950, Triumph was on a cruise to Japan as part of the Far East Fleet. She was nearing Hong Kong when news reached Triumph and her accompanying ships of war breaking out in the Korean peninsula, forcing Triumph into a state of alert, including fully armed aircraft on deck. Triumph, escorted by the destroyer Cossack, who would also act as an escort to Triumph's sister ship Theseus, was refueled and reprovisioned at the Royal Australian Naval Base at Kure, Japan. The C-class destroyer Consort and the cruiser Jamaica, who would both have prominent roles during the Korean War, as well as the Australian River-class frigate Shoalhaven and the Royal Fleet auxiliary tanker Wave Conqueror, joined Triumph as she left the base. The following day, she and her escorts headed for Okinawa, refueling at the American base there. Then they proceeded to Western Korean waters, where other Royal Navy warships were converging. At this time, she was the sole British carrier in the Far East. She was thus destined to have a vital role in the early months of the Korean War. After joining the U.S. Fleet 827 Naval Air Squadron, part of Triumph's Air Group commenced operations with a number of vintage Seafires, a naval variant of the iconic Spitfire, and which saw much action during the closing years of the Second World War. She also flew Fireflies during the initial operations of the Korean War, which were of a similar age. The Seafires and Fireflies of Triumph, in conjunction with aircraft from the American carrier Valley Forge, hit airfields at Pyongyang and Hwaraeju on 3 July, the first carrier strikes of the war, with Triumph launching 12 Fireflies and 9 Seafires, all armed with rockets, against Hwaraeju. The Seafires, though agile and fast, had an appearance that was a liability when operating with Allied forces. The aircraft had a remarkable similarity to the Yak-9, a WW-2 Soviet fighter aircraft, in service with the North Korean forces. Such similarities would play to an almost tragic incident further into Triumph's deployment during the Korean War. On 19 July 1950, Lieutenant P. Kane, flying a Sea Otter, an air sea rescue aircraft, performed the last operational sea rescue of that type, when a F-4U Corsair had been shot down by anti-aircraft fire, forcing the American pilot to ditch into very rough seas. The Sea Otter landed despite the adverse conditions and the American pilot was soon rescued. The Sea Otter returned to Triumph successfully, thanks mainly to the skill of the pilot, who was awarded the U.S. Air Medal as a result. On 28 July, an almost tragic event occurred, when a flight of Seafires were deployed to an area to investigate possible enemy air activity. They discovered that the activity was a flight of American B-29 bombers. One of the Seafires was hit by one of the bombers in its fuel tank, forcing the pilot to bail out and land in terrible sea conditions. Rescue by Sea Otter was impossible due to the appalling conditions. The pilot was forced to wait about an hour until he was rescued by the American destroyer Eversail. Further combat air patrol and anti-submarine operations continued until she left Korean waters for Kure in Japan. Japan, where she spent her 8 days there in refit. On the 9th of July, Triumph was back on the west coast of Korea, accompanied by the cruiser Kenya, the destroyer Comus and 2 Canadian warships, Athabaskan and Sioux. Seafires launched numerous photographic reconnaissance operations around areas such as Mokpo, Kunsan, Chinam, as well as Incheon. Over the next few days, Seafires destroyed 2 North Korean gunboats, attacked railway tracks, small coaster vessels and oil tanks. On the 23rd of August, Triumph, with just 9 operational aircraft left, returned to Sasebo, Japan, where she joined 2 other carriers, the Valley Forge and Philippine Sea. While in harbor, the North Koreans launched an unexpected air attack, hitting Comus, causing damage to her hull and killing 1 sailor in the process. She was escorted to Kyoto for repair by her sister ship consort. This caused the carriers to be extra vigilant in the aftermath of the attack, with an increase in cap operations. On the 29th of August, another incident occurred, when a ferry Firefly landed without an arrestor hook and was stopped by the safety barrier. A large piece of propeller blade broke off, hurtled towards the surface of the flying control position, breaking the glass of the operations room and entering the compartment with tragic consequences, striking Lieutenant Commander I.M. McLaughlin, the commanding officer of 800 Naval Air Squadron, who later died from the injuries sustained in this freak incident. He was buried at sea off the coast of South Korea with full naval honors. On the 30th of August, after a 4-day patrol, Triumph returned to Sasebo, where she received 14 aircraft from the support carrier Unicorn. On the 3rd of September, Triumph departed Sasebo for the west coast of Korea. When she got there, her aircraft performed the now routine cap missions along with reconnaissance duties and bombardment spotting for the Fiji-class cruiser Jamaica and the destroyer Charity. After the 6th of September, Triumph, accompanied by Athabaskan, Warramunga and Bataan, proceeded to the east coast of Korea to replace the carriers of the U.S. 7th Fleet. Operations commenced on the 8th, with Fireflies and Seafires attacking numerous targets, causing much havoc for the North Korean forces. On the 9th, bad weather forced operations to limit themselves to just 8 sorties, with 4 Fireflies attacking the airfield at Koryo, causing a large amount of damage. 800 NAS's aircraft was decreased yet again, now to just 6 aircraft, after 4 others had been written off. The following day, Triumph returned once again to Sasebo. On the 12th of September, Triumph departed Sasebo, accompanied by Warramunga and the Royal Navy C-class destroyers Charity, Cockade and Concorde. Their objective, though unknown to the crews of the ships at the time, was to cover the landings at Incheon. The group, part of CTF 91, a Commonwealth task force, was joined by the cruiser Ceylon and Ran warship Bataan, and was now known as the Northern Group. There was also a much smaller southern group which comprised the Canadian ships Athabaskan, Cayuga and Sioux. Triumph's aircraft provided vital air cover for the attacking forces in the first few days before the landings. After the landings took place, Triumph and her accompanying escort provided anti-submarine patrols, while her aircraft commenced interdiction and spotting operations. The latter operations proved very successful, with Fireflies spotting for the cruisers Jamaica and Kenya. Thanks to the spotting by the Fireflies, Jamaica launched a devastating bombardment on North Korean positions, destroying a hidden cache of weapons, which resulted in the top of a hill being completely obliterated, creating a large plume of smoke that reached 8,000 feet. The end of the day's operations led to a message to the commander of the Commonwealth Naval Forces, Admiral Andros, for the United Nations Overall Command Commander, General Douglas MacArthur, my heartiest felicitations on the splendid conduct of the fleet units under your command. They have added another glamorous page to the long and brilliant histories of the navies of the British Commonwealth. By the end of D-Day, an astonishing 13,000 troops and all their equipment had been landed. On the 17th of September, North Korean aircraft bombed the American warship Rochester, as well as strafing the British cruiser Jamaica, killing 1 and wounding 2. Shortly afterwards, both warships managed to carry out a brief bombardment of North Korean troops. On the 21st of September, Triumph entered Sasebo for the last time in her deployment during the Korean War. She spent 2 days there in dry dock for temporary repairs before departing for Hong Kong on the 25th of September, her role in the conflict being replaced by Theseus. Remainder of service. After her Korean service, Triumph was selected as the replacement for HMS Devonshire as a cadet training ship. She carried 2 terms each of 100 RN and Commonwealth cadets on 3 cruises each year, in the spring to the West Indies, in the summer to Scandinavia and around the UK, and in the autumn to the Mediterranean. She carried 3 Sea Balliol aircraft with which to inculcate air-mindedness in the cadets. In 1952, Triumph was used for the first trials of an angled flight deck. Her original deck markings were obliterated and replaced with new ones at an angle to the long axis of the ship. The success of these trials led to the development of the now standard design, with additional areas of the flight deck added to the port side of the ship. In 1954 she was diverted to ferry survivors of the troop ship Empire Windrush from North Africa to Gibraltar for repatriation. In 1955 she replaced HMS Albion on a goodwill visit to Leningrad. This terminated in her captain Varial Beg, carrying out a sternboard down the Neva against a beam gale after her hastily laid Soviet sternbuoy had dragged. Her cadet training duties ended with the autumn cruise of 1955, when changes in the system of training RN officers rendered her redundant. Shortly before arriving home to Devonport, Triumph executed the last axial deck landing in the RN. Triumph was then converted between 1956 and 1965 into a heavy repair ship, emerging from the work with the pendant number A108. Triumph was based in Singapore after her conversion, being involved in a major exercise in 1968 in the Far East, with numerous capital ships from the United Kingdom and other nations taking part, as well as dozens of destroyers and frigates. Triumph was used as a heavy repair and transport ship for troops. In 1975 she was placed in reserve at Chatham Dockyard, where she was used as a backdrop for the annual Navy Days, and in 1981 she was struck and subsequently scrapped in Spain.